Welcome back, everyone, here to Full Circle, Florida. Let's go ahead and bring in ABC News political reporter Jay O'Brien, joining us from Washington, D.C. Jay, how did J.D. Vance and Tim Walz perform in terms of presenting their policies and their ideas effectively during this debate? And I'm curious if there's any read yet on whether this had any impact on what must be a quickly shrinking pool of undecided voters at this point.
A little too early to see the impact on any kind of undecided voters. That's going to be borne out in the coming days, if not weeks. But what we have seen is some snap polling that shows both candidates grew their favorability ratings in a way as they somewhat reintroduced themselves to the nation. But J.D. Vance closed the gap a lot more with his favorability ratings. And it comes because he gave, by all accounts, a more measured debate performance. He was a practiced debater, whereas Tim Walz even acknowledged, according to sources who told ABC News this, ahead of the debate, that he was nervous. He gave a little bit more of a shaky debate performance. So he wasn't as practiced out there as J.D. Vance, who has been doing not just interviews and campaign events, but the Sunday shows and has faced a lot of adversarial questioning. But Tim Walz, despite all of that, was able to get some moments out of J.D. Vance that we are seeing getting some play with voters and some of those undecided voters. He got J.D. Vance to essentially say that in Vance's view, Donald Trump saved Obamacare, which is not true. Donald Trump spent years trying to get rid of Obamacare, and then he had that telling moment towards the end, which the Harris campaign has already turned into ads, somewhat targeting those moderate Republicans and undecideds, asking J.D. Vance if Donald Trump won the 2020 election. And J.D. Vance, as you know, didn't answer that question and he just said he's looking towards the future.
Yeah, it was interesting how cordial they were with each other. It kind of harkened back to debates that we've seen in the distant past, it seems, at this point. And I'm wondering, first of all, did that register with voters, and to what extent did they give a contrast on their views? It's never about the what, it's about the how. And they even agreed on the problem at times, but disagreed on the solution.
Well, it's certainly the desire of both campaigns for that attitude to register with voters. Remember, these are two VP contenders that were picked largely because of their backgrounds. J.D. Vance from Ohio, deep family roots in Appalachia. Tim Walz, a Midwestern governor. They're hoping that both of those candidates can appeal to some of those key Midwestern swing state voters. We're talking about, of course, Rust Belt states like Michigan and Wisconsin. We're talking about Pennsylvania, too. And the question then facing this campaign is, can those candidates bring that attitude, that cordial attitude that they had on that stage, out onto the campaign trail? There's a sense from Democrats that certainly Tim Walz can. I've heard from some Republicans who say they saw a different J.D. Vance in a way last night. He was less combative, and they're curious to see if he brings that out on the trail as well.
Well, I tell you, Jay, it was certainly nice to see. It's perhaps a path forward to get people to talk to each other again, even if they disagree on the issues passionately. Jay O'Brien coming to us from Washington, D.C. Jay, thank you. Okay, let's bring in our political analyst right now, Dr. Susan MacManus, here with us again this week. And the tone of this debate, I think a lot of people might have been surprised by it. It was a welcome change, no matter what side you're on. Was this a glimpse into perhaps a post-Trump world where we could get back to this kind of climate where two people with two contrasting ideas of how they want to run things can argue, they can disagree, but without the name calling, without getting nasty, and bringing each other down?
Believe me, a lot of Americans would really wish for that. Yeah. But let's also look at why that was. Why all of a sudden are these nice to each other and we have this kind of debate? It's all about the undecideds. And right now, a huge portion of America already knows who they're going to vote for, and their mind isn't going to be changed. But you have a small pool of voters that could tip it in one direction or another who are undecided, and they decidedly don't like nasty politics and conflict.
Yeah, we should perhaps listen to those voices sometimes. Well, we're now less than a month away till Election Day or election season, because this may go beyond Election Day. But Hurricane Helene, as you know, it hit North Carolina very hard. Obviously hit here in Florida too, very hard in some places. And it happens to be a swing state in North Carolina now. Do you see that having an impact on the election? I've been in disaster zones before. I can tell you, when you go without food and water for a few days or longer, you start caring less about politics.
Well, absolutely. And it's not just North Carolina that's a swing state, it's also Georgia. And that was also heavily hit. And does it have a political impact? Yes, it does. For one, the areas hardest hit in both of those states were rural areas where the Republicans are more likely voters than not. And the question is, will they or will they not vote? On the other side, though, there's also a question of it taking so long for the federal government to come in there that people are thinking, well, you know, you help everybody else, you help all the other countries of the world, but you can't get help into here immediately when charities and churches and other groups can.
Can get frustrating really quick. Any other states that you've got your eye on leading up to this final stretch here?
Well, obviously the other swing states, but particularly two, Michigan and Pennsylvania. And I think maybe Arizona, but definitely Pennsylvania and Michigan, and that's where they're spending a lot of time right now, both candidates.
What is the bigger headache right now for the White House and by extension the Harris campaign? And I was going to ask you about the dock worker strike, but apparently that's going to go away at least for the next couple of months. But the escalating attacks between Israel and Iran, and now the hurricane and the leftover fallout from that. And I just, this idea, I don't think we're talking enough about these powerful weather events that are happening every year. It changes a lot of things.
Well, we also know that these kinds of hurricanes, October is the premier time that it occurs. And where are we? We're in October, but September, October are prime times for hurricanes. And different parts of the country have different kinds of natural disasters that happen, like tornadoes in the Midwest and fires in California. We kind of know when all those are. But it's never easy to predict. And I think one of the complaints that a lot of people have right now is that government doesn't seem to be able to sit down and think of what do you do if this?
Right.
Plan ahead. It looks like everything is reactive and not well done.
Doesn't matter if you've got an R or D next to your name, just be competent. That's what people want. Susan, hang with me. We're not done yet. When we come back, our final thoughts on the week that was and the week ahead.